Welcome to Marathon 113. 113. Is that a bad luck number? I don't know. 113 has got the craziest story I've ever done on this channel at the end of this video. It's the last story in this video. I've never received a story like this ever in my life, and it is, it's unreal. Hey, after this video, don't forget to go over to the What If It's True podcast channel, or you can find What If It's True episode 3, which was just uploaded yesterday, on the YouTube channel or out on the podcast network. You can also go to my website at dixiecryptid.com. Listen to all my podcasts. They're all different than the Dixie material. So get over there and take a look. But right now, get ready for 3 great stories, and the last one is going to blow your doors off. It's going to kick your door in. Hope you guys like it. All right, here we go. I have an email from Matthew, and here's what Matthew writes. As a child growing up every summer from the age of 5, my father and grandfather, older brother, and myself would drive from Chicago to Sioux Narrows, Ontario, staying at a resort. There were no roads to the resort. We had to travel the last 30 minutes by boat. My mother usually came up later with my 3 younger brothers. This place was great. They pumped water out of the lake to a homemade water tower, and spigots were located here and there around the camp. The water was beautiful. The resort was made up of a main lodge and 10 or 12 cabins on a 5-acre peninsula. A generator started around 7 p.m. for lights. There was no telephone and no overland route to town except over the ice during the winter. They would even cut ice each winter and keep it in the ice house buried in sawdust, keeping the ice for years. There were 5 lakes, and they were all connected, and there were boats in 8 other lakes to portage into for different species of fish: walleye, smallmouth, northern pike, muskie, and lake trout. Some lakes had all species of fish, and some were more specific. We portaged off into a lake called Hope Lake. I remember there was a hermit living on an island in this lake, but we never saw him. From early on, one of the Oglala Sioux guides we hired would always tell us to watch out for the gorilla of Hope Lake. Every time we fished with this guide, he gave us the same warning. It was quite unnerving to me as a child, even into my teenage years. Later in years, I got my first job. I bought a car and a new 14-foot Smokecraft small car topper boat and my own 9.5 horsepower Johnson outboard motor. This gave me freedom to venture off on my own fishing, and I could stay as long as I wanted. On my solo fishing trips, I would stop at midday on shore for lunch, and I would do some swimming or exploring in the untouched forests of aspen, beech, and pines. I'd let my imagination roam, wondering if anybody had ever explored the places that I was walking on. Portaging into Hope Lake alone for smallmouth, I always felt very uncomfortable, or actually afraid. Once, having dragged my boat across and on the water, always felt more at ease, but never completely comfortable. Something always bothered me. It was a great little lake, but the years of warning by the guide stuck with me, and I eventually quit going to Hope Lake by myself. Closer to the resort, and in the evenings, I would go out after dinner just before dark to get in an extra hour of fishing. I enjoyed the sounds of the loons and watching the otters play. I didn't do this every day. Sometimes I would go with my friends to hunt for muskie, but I loved the solitude of fishing my spot in the evenings alone. One evening, after getting into my little spot, I dropped my anchor and I cast a minnow, and I began to relax. I looked around, taking in the whole scene, and on a rock island not far from me, I saw a deer laying on the island close to the water. As I focused in, it was obvious this deer had been mutilated. The head was attached with antlers visible, but the body had been ravaged. The kill was fresh. I had fished this spot the 2 previous evenings and the deer was not there. The kill had to have taken place within the last 24 hours. I stared at the macabre scene and it occurred to me the loons were quiet. There were none of the usual sounds I loved hearing during this time of day other than the horde of mosquitoes trying to drain me of blood. I had seen wildlife swimming in the lake, deer, bear, and other smaller creatures, but I never saw anything alive on this small rock island in all the years that I fished this area, and I spent at least 5 of the 7 days a week fishing this spot during the evenings. I heard my bobber slap the water. I looked over and a big fish was running with the bait. But at the same moment, the most dreadful feeling came over me. I felt like something evil was in the area. There's no way that I can convey my senses at this time or in words, but I never felt anything like that in my 18 years on Earth. I am 61 this year and I've never felt it since. It overpowered my natural instinct to set the hook on this big fish, so I didn't. I just let him run until the spool snapped tight out of line. And with my pocket knife, I cut the line, I dropped my rod in the boat, and I calmly prepared to leave the area. Something was on that island, something evil, and it meant business, and I was not going to push my luck. There were 2 routes back to the lodge. One would take me 30 minutes. The other would take an hour around a long peninsula where I normally drag my boat over to save a long ride. I was not getting out of this boat, so I took the long route. The farther I got from that island, the better I began to feel. Making the turn around the end of the peninsula at full throttle, I saw a mated pair of loons sitting on the glass-like water. I cut the engine and began drifting, and I could hear them making the lonely call they do at the end of the day. Darkness was coming fast, but the sound of those loons seemed to calm me, and I began to feel normal again. I actually stopped when I was far enough away from the island and made a few more casts. A good pike raised to my bait once, but it never hit. That just made the night normal even more. I made it back to camp, ate a good supper, and I had a restless night of sleep, but I felt like I was safe. This event was 44 years ago. I've been back to the area many times and had several great weeks of fishing on those beautiful lakes, but it's been years since my last trip. I have even motored past that rock island a few times, but I never stopped. I doubt I would enjoy fishing that spot again. I hope to get back there someday. I hope when I see it again, it has not changed. The days were filled with fun and the nights were magical, watching the aurora borealis and the millions of stars. It is my favorite place in the world, but on that day, something was on that island and it was watching me. It did not want me there, and I followed my instincts and I left. I'm not in any way saying that it was Sasquatch, but I have a hunch that it may have been, but I may never know. Matthew, oh man. Without anything really happening in this story gave me the creeps as much as any story I've read. Woo, man. I mean, to be sitting there fishing and just all of a sudden overcome with this feeling of dread. And I can't say that that's ever happened to me. I kind of get that sometimes before I walk in a dentist office. And I used to when I was a kid, now when I was going into a doctor's office to get a shot. So I kind of sort of know what that feels like. But man, what a good story, and you conveyed it so well. You know, you don't know if it was Sasquatch, you say you have a hunch, but a lot of people say that these beings can really project a mood onto people from a distance. They can give you a sense of dread. It's like you know they're there. You can't see them, but you know they're there. This is a great story, and this is good evidence of that. Now, again, we don't know that's what it was, but if it was, it's pretty cool. Thanks, Matthew, for writing the story, buddy. You did a great job. Hey, a little intermission here between the stories. I don't think I've ever mentioned this website that I go to almost 4 or 5 times a week just to catch up on what everybody's doing out in the Bigfoot community. The website is called Squatchable.com. 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 I'm kind of kicking myself for not telling y'all about this, and some of you may already know. Squatchable.com is the one place on the internet you can go for everything Bigfoot. When you first go to their homepage, you'll see video after video after video of YouTube, other platform videos. These guys have actually an algorithm, and they catch everything with Bigfoot and they show it on their homepage. So you don't have to do the surfing through YouTube to find Bigfoot videos. You can just go to Squatchable.com and it's all right there combined in one page. And there are thousands of videos linked on this website just from the first page. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that you can sign up for a newsletter and catch the latest videos that their algorithm has found. You can also search for Bigfoot reports. You can report a Sasquatch sighting. There's a form at the bottom to report those to Squatchable. And there's a list of states. And so if you want to catch Bigfoot encounters in your state, for instance, I'm looking at Mississippi. I'm clicking Mississippi right now. And there's got to be 300 or 400 Bigfoot encounters. They go from the BFRO to, just every organization that reports these encounters. There's a list of them by state. It's a great website, and they're not paying me to do this. I just wanted you guys to know it's one of my go-to sources for Squatch research. Squatchable.com. You guys go over there and take a look. Real simple website, real easy to navigate. Look through the videos at the top, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll see all these search options that you can use. And I really suggest you do it. And even, on the search options, when you click a state, like for instance, Kentucky, there's all the counties. All the Bigfoot reports are isolated by county. So you can click on Pike County, for instance, and I'm looking at 20. Well, no, there's about 8 of them in Pike County. Let's look at Harlan County. I'm looking at 4 or 5. Anyway, I'll shut up about it, but I've never talked about it before, and I thought you guys might be interested in that. And it may help you with your Bigfoot fix between videos. So go over and take a look at Squatchable.com. Here's an email from a gentleman who does not want his name revealed. That's no big deal. Here's what he writes. I'd like to tell you about my Bigfoot encounter, but I'd like to be anonymous. I've only told 3 other people who I thought were trustworthy. I wouldn't want the reputation of being a bit nutty getting in the way of my positive forward movement. I'm sure you can imagine the stress of that type of ridicule. I'm just going to stop here and say, I get this from so many people. People keep these stories in, and this is such a fun way for people to actually anonymously share their stories. They're really good. And I know people have reasons they want to be anonymous, and I actually recommend that you be anonymous. I know there's other folks out there who say, well, your story just doesn't have any bite unless you give your full name. Well, I just think that's a bunch of bullcrap. There's no need to give your full name. Just share the story. That's the point of all this. Anyway, that's my rant for the day. Let's get on with the email. He says, I live in a tiny cabin at the edge of a wooded swamp. It patches out along various farmers' fields where game animals can thrive. They trek back and forth close to the cabin as if the woodline is a funnel for their trails to meet. It would only make sense, at least in my mind, that predators would be on the fringe stalking their prey. The farmers have game cams out that frequently pick up cougar, bear, bobcat all the time. It's a testament to the volume of food the predators have available in that region. It's not too far of a stretch to see where some Sasquatch might be there as well. That is, unless you're skeptical, which you should be until enough evidence convinces you otherwise. However, the area has stories of these creatures dating back for centuries. It seems to be a silent little secret that nobody wants to talk about openly. There are a lot of strange things here, including the beginnings of several legends. But for now, I'll stick to my story and try to have as much continuity as possible. I bought the cabin after becoming disabled and required a cheap place to live in peace. I decided to live near my family where they could see me more and I could get help if a medical emergency came up. I wasn't in the place for more than a few months when I got a dog from a friend who needed a good home. She was abused and in a bad spot, and she needed rescuing. It was a good deal for the both of us. One summer night, I had the windows open, and I was enjoying a slight breeze and the sounds of the night as I slept. About 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I awoke to a growl from the dog and then a whimper. I paid no attention because I thought there might be a thunderstorm approaching or some other mundane thing. I rolled over and I took a deep breath, thinking to myself how refreshing and peaceful my night was going to be. I was wrong about that. A minute later, I heard what sounded like a couple of samurai warriors talking to each other. It startled me enough to set up, turn, and place my feet on the floor. I listened for a while as the conversation grew nearer. It sounded like they were at the corner of the road just 200 feet away. I thought someone was messing around out there, maybe drunks or poachers. The language sounded rough and foreign to me, yet it seemed like a question and an answer type of a conversation. The dog sprung a leak and peed all over the house and then squeezed under my bed. She was scared out of her wits, and I was getting mad about it. I finally yelled out, "Hey, y'all shut up and get out of here. I'm calling the police." A few seconds went by and everything was silent except for the shivering bones hitting the floor and the bed from the dog. That's when I heard a snort or a grunt and then a loud voice saying what sounded like to me, "Oh, why?" It rattled the back window like it usually did when a big diesel would drive by on the road. The voice didn't have the upward inflection of asking the question, though. It was more of a commanding sound full of anger. Then who or whatever it was stomped through the thick part of the wooded line behind the house. There were breaking branches on their way through to the big woods behind the house. The sticks kept breaking, but they faded out. It was over in just a couple of minutes, and I was almost frozen from the fact that I knew these were not humans. It wasn't until a half a dozen or so years later that we finally saw 1 or 2 Sasquatch. I'm not so sure about the second one. I was walking the dog again, but this time just on the side of the road. We had 6 inches of slush that had fallen overnight, and I didn't feel like walking around getting soaked from the knees down. I was trying to get both of us healthy by walking a lot. I was recovering from open heart surgery, and I needed to keep moving and gain strength. Even though the morning was a little misty and foggy, you could see for a long way. It seemed to be holding near the ground. We were almost home, just a couple of 100 yards in fact. The little hill we descended had pines on one side and hardwoods on the other. I heard a branch break and then a low grunt or breath. I couldn't tell. I thought there was a bear in the ditch. You know when you go past planted red pines and you can see rows at 45-degree angles? Well, that's what I did, and I saw one of the oddball white pines about 10 feet tall in the middle of the row. And I was stunned to see a Bigfoot standing in front of the tree like it was trying to blend in. It was much larger than the size of the tree, but it was just as wide. I could see black and dark gray fur all over except for its face. It looked like a pencil sketch and even shaded whites of its eyes. I stared at it for a few seconds and I saw that it had the look of absolute rage in its eyes. You know the kind of blackout rage when you see someone have with no consequences as they destroy everything in sight? Yeah, it was like that, and I didn't know what my next move was going to be. I did, however, gather the strength to say, "Hello there," in the nicest way possible. And then I followed up with, "We're just passing through, and we're going home, and we mean no harm." The thing didn't move a muscle. It didn't even blink, and it kept glaring at us. Just then the dog came to the end of her leash and was standing on her hind legs, choking herself. She was trying to get to something on the opposite side of the road, but I didn't see what she was interested in. When I looked back to the creature, it was gone, and daylight shone through the tree onto the white of wet snow behind it. I looked left one more time to where the dog was concerned, and I said, "It's time to go," and I pulled her towards home. She bolted in that direction and came to the end of her lead again, choking herself once again. Well, that is the big stuff, but the little stuff kept happening throughout the years, and it even happens today. There are typical wood knocks at night and sometimes during the day. I've been hit with pine cones from the side and behind me, and there are no pines growing in the area. There was once a toddler's neon green shoe sitting on a stump next to stacked rocks where we used to walk. I picked up the shoe and I moved it to another stump a few hundred yards away, deeper into the forest. Strangely enough, the shoe found its way to my neighbor's cabin. It was sitting on the porch one day when we got there. Even though my little dog passed away this spring, I still go for walks once in a while for health reasons. It's quieter in the cabin now and a little lonelier. I do have something tapping on the side of my house every other night or so. It sounds like someone is knocking. So I get up, I turn on the yard light, and then double-check all the locks. Thank you for taking the time to read these stories on your channel. It helps to know that other people have experienced these creatures and lived to tell about it. It gives me a peace of mind sometimes to know that the bizarre doesn't always get demonized and is open for further study. And then he signs off. And that's, oh man, what can I add to that? That's a great story. Sorry about your dog. Oh man, that's the worst part of the story. But what interests me the most about this story that he didn't go into a lot of detail was that green shoe. So he finds a shoe on a stump next to some stacked rocks. He picks the shoe up, moves it deeper into the forest, I'm assuming to test to see if this is something that left the shoe there. And then apparently at some later date, he finds the shoe on his neighbor's porch. I wonder what that conversation was like with his neighbor. Like, "Hey man, where'd you get this shoe? I saw this shoe in the woods. I moved it," and tell him the whole story and see what comes up. But I would love to know. I don't know. Y'all may not be interested in that, but that sounds crazy to me. Well, listen, to the writer, thank you for sending this. I got this about a year ago, and it's so good. And I've been wanting to put it in a video, and it finally came up, and I'm glad we got it in. And he did a great job writing it. The guy's a good writer. So I really appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Okay, the story I'm about to share with you is probably the most outrageous story I've ever read. I'm not questioning the story, but I don't get too many like this, and it's really scary. I want to say I'm sharing this with you for your entertainment, but this is some serious stuff. So you be the judge and just hang on, just settle in and hang on, because this is a wild ride. He titles the story, "Just Call It a Bear Attack," whatever you want to call it, but I survived. I'm asking that you not reveal my name. I've had 2 experiences with 2 different cryptids. It may sound unusual or lucky to some, but after you hear this story, you decide for yourself if I was lucky. I'm withholding exact dates and locations for this story, but it is absolutely true. These are the things that happen to men that create nightmares in others. I have to give you this background information before I get into the grim details of my encounter to better help you understand a few things as they are happening. My friend and I hunted all over the Appalachian Mountains and in different states. We were both active rifle and bow hunters, and this story takes place at the beginning of bow season. I became more of a speed nut with my bow's performance, wanting my bow to shoot super fast and straight, using only one sight pin to eliminate the distance guesswork, and it has worked well for me over the past years. I achieved this by using an overdraw, allowing for me to use shorter arrows that reduced the arrow weight, and that helped my 70-pound bow shoot consistently over 300 feet per second. I could shoot accurately with one pin up to 45 yards, no guesswork, and a very flat trajectory. I had another quirk, and that is using my climber tree stand to heights much higher than normal. I always hunt from a position 40 feet up in a tree. I know this height is achieved because when I set my stand and climb, I have a 40-foot rope attached to my stand with the other end tied to my bow and my day pack, which remains on the ground. While climbing, I feel the rope grow taut and I know that I'm at my desired height. I then simply pull up my supplies after securing my stand. This method is used by other bow hunters using climbing stands because it's easier to pull up your belongings rather than trying to climb up and down with them. You can't use a climber efficiently carrying everything up with you when you are ascending or descending a tree, so these things are raised and lowered with a rope. I like this height because I believe most animals use their peripheral vision and do not look intentionally upwards to that height in a tree, therefore I remain unseen. With all that out of the way, I must tell you that I'm becoming emotional at this point because it is the time for me to tell you the grim details about what happened. This is very difficult and has been suppressed in me for many years. This has haunted me for almost 30 years. A very traumatic experience scaring me deeply, both physically and mentally. I'm only telling this now because I'm in my 70s and I feel I need to warn and alert others. I no longer care what others say about me. It was a brisk fall day and my friend and I arrived at a good spot in the mountains that we had chosen by map, far away from everyone and close to a good bedding and water source. We had to start our journey the night before to reach our secluded spot. The woods were beginning to open up with the leaves mostly fallen, and my friend and I set up about 100 or so yards apart, where we could see one another after first light at each side of the funnel, which is a narrow area between a food source or bedding and water, and well traveled by deer from one place to another. We thought it to be a perfect spot to catch deer passing through. My friend was looking one way and I was looking in the opposite direction. I guess it was around 10 a.m. when I heard my friend making a racket and I wondered what he was doing. He only sets his tree stand about 15 foot off the ground, but then I heard him yell something as he pulled his pistol. He fired several shots from his .45 ACP that he always carried bow hunting, and then everything went to hell from that. I saw this creature directly under his stand, and with one quick motion, it either jumped or just reached up and grabbed his stand, and down everything came. My friend was then hanging by his safety harness, but that thing was on him in no time, and it ripped him to the ground. I could hear him screaming as it was raking at him with its claws with such ferocity, and just as quickly as his screams stopped. It was standing on two legs the entire time and was not a bear or anything I had ever seen before. I could see the body proportions were all wrong for it to be a bear. With everything happening so fast, I did not know what to do. I didn't have a firearm, and the distance was too great for my bow, and I only had a United States Marine Corps K-bar World War II knife with a 7-inch blade. And I have to admit I was frozen with fear knowing that my friend was either dead or close to it. It would take me several long minutes to climb down from my position, so I just waited in silence as my friend laid at this thing's feet, eerily quiet and not moving. I don't know to this day if that attack was provoked by my friend shooting it or what he saw up to that time forcing him to pull his firearm. Was it fear or was he under attack? That thing was now satisfied that my friend was no more of a threat, and it started circling and walking towards me on two legs. It was staring at the ground and sniffing as if it was backtracking where my friend had walked to his stand from my tree to his. It was as if it wanted to see where he had come from, but the tracks and the scent were leading it directly to me. When it was right under me, it paused and was sniffing the air and then continued past my tree, still on the trail we had walked in on, but now it obviously detected two different scents, and it stopped and dropped to all fours, and it sniffed the ground and the air, and it was really trying to figure all this out. I now had the time to really look at this creature, taking in as much detail as I could. It was very tall and muscular. Its hair was coarse and black in color. It had a thicker mane of gray and black hair going from its neck down to the center of its back, which was a bit hunched over. It had a definite canine face with a huge muzzle and big teeth. The mouth was always open. The ears were pointed and standing straight up. The legs were dog-like but very muscular at the top, and the feet had claws. The arms were so long and muscular that it had more of what I would say hands with long claws on each finger, and they were bloody. It was my friend's blood. It spent most of its time on 2 feet, and this thing looked like a werewolf right out of the movies. The creature paced around the path we had walked in on, and it never looked up at me, assuming it never expected anyone up that high. It obviously knew there was someone else here. I drew my bow and I prayed. My bow did not make much of a sound as I drew my arrow, but this thing heard me anyway, and it looked up and we locked eyes. It was only about 10 yards from my tree, and now I was committed, so I released the arrow and it penetrated just below its left shoulder. It let out a roar and it ran off. I thought this might be my only chance to get out of this tree, so without hesitation I climbed down as fast as I could, bow on my lap, and as soon as I was on the ground getting myself together, it returned unbelievably fast. I grabbed my tree stand, and now I was facing this creature only feet away. I could clearly see my arrow still buried in its upper chest, so with my tree stand in my hands, I threw the stand at it to give me time to do something, and I did not know what, so being a martial artist, I reacted defensively and gave it a good kick in the knee, trying to take it off its balance, while its arms were busy dealing with the tree stand. But its knee, though bending back like a dog's, was as solid as if I had kicked a telephone pole. I knew this was it for me, so I instinctively and immediately drew my knife in the same movement. There was no way I could have kicked that thing any higher to do any damage because its knees were chest high to me, with its head being around 3 feet taller than I was. I didn't think the kick would do much damage, but I still hoped it would buckle its knee. But with that failing, it did give me another split second, and the creature hesitated from the kick long enough for me to plunge my knife into its side, hoping it would retreat again. But instead, this time it retaliated viciously by backhanding me with its left clawed hand, and then slashing me with its right claw, going down my shoulder, chest, and stomach, all in one fast movement. I think the force of its first blow was actually my salvation, because it knocked me back just far enough that I did not receive the full impact of the claws from its right hand, though it was still enough to cause significant damage to my flesh, even through my clothing. It was lights out for me, and the next thing that I remember is waking up in what appeared to me to be a shallow grave of dirt, leaves, and branches. The area was not dug out, rather just a depression and a heap of debris thrown on top of me. I did not know where I was, but everything was quiet. I could hear running water somewhere close, and I knew this would be my only chance. I slowly climbed out, and as I tried to stand, my right foot and ankle were pretty ripped up, and my boot was missing. This creature must have dragged me around by my foot. I had to gather all the strength I had to make it to the running water. I knew this thing could easily track me on land, especially now that I was bleeding, so I had to make it to the water and hope that it would help to hide my scent. When I reached the water, I was lucky because it was swiftly moving water deep enough to carry me away. I grabbed a log and went into the water, and it was cold, but with each passing second, I was hoping it was taking me away from this beast. At one point, I thought I heard a howl in the distance, but I can't be sure. I stayed in that water for what seemed like an eternity, and I do not know how far I traveled, but I came upon a camp and was lucky enough to be helped by 2 other hunters who were back at their camp eating. They took me to the hospital, and on that trip I told the 2 hunters that rescued me what was out there, but I don't know if they believed me since I was in such bad shape. They kept me in the hospital for a week, stitching my wounds and taking precautions for infection. I was visited by local police, and I gave them a location on the map of where we were and all that happened, but they returned 2 days later telling me that they found my busted bow and 2 twisted tree stands, but no sign of my friend other than some blood. It was now the last day of my hospital stay, and I was visited by 2 mysterious men who drilled me with questions. I gave them every detail that was burned into my memory, and after hearing all that I told them, they said it must have been a bear. I countered with, "There's no way it was a bear. I was confronting this creature, looking right at it, and I know what a bear looks like." And they replied with, "No, you don't understand. It was a bear." And they said that they know who I am, and they know everything about me, and they do not want to hear me saying anything except it was a bear attack. Well, I'm getting too old now to worry about those guys who were there present. I lost a good friend that day, and I have physical and mental scars to remind me every day that prove that the nightmares that I have every night are real. My final word to hunters is there's something out there, so at least let others know where you will be. I don't know what it would take to bring this thing down. Obviously, much more than hunters, especially bow hunters, who normally have with them just a bow and an arrow, and in my case, it was shot at least 3 times with a .45 automatic, and my bow shooting a 360 grain arrow at 315 feet per second, and then stabbed with my knife, penetrating all 7 inches of the knife. Now, this may sound crazy, but next year on my friend's 70th birthday, I'm returning to that spot to honor my friend and place some flowers about that spot. But this time, I'm going to be taking my AR rifle and a .50 Beowulf caliber, and a hefty sidearm, of course, and a larger knife. This is something I have to do. I know there was nothing I could have done to help my friend that day, but that does not take away the hurt, the pain, and the nightmares. I may be living on borrowed time, but I'm being drawn back, and maybe this will help put closure for me in one way or another. People that do not know me, sometimes at the beach, who see me without a shirt on, look at my scars and they ask what happened. I mean, how do you answer that? My usual response is I say it was a bear attack, because they would not believe the truth and it would take much longer for me to respond that way. So avoiding a long story, I simply say those 2 words, bear attack. I hope that by sharing this story with you and your listeners who also have had encounters, that my story may help to save someone. I don't know if these creatures only violently react to aggression or what my friend saw to make him shoot. Perhaps fear because it was coming at him. I can certainly understand my friend shooting since he was so much lower to the ground, and that creature may have been the aggressor. I survived that encounter, and my friend did not, and there are secret groups out there that want to hide the encounters like this from the public. But I have kept this locked inside me for all these years, and I need to start doing something about it and let people know. Okay, that's the end of that story, and I've never received a story anywhere close to this story. I was actually going to put it on What If It's True podcast, but this Dixie Cryptid channel has a bigger audience, and I thought you guys would really like to hear this one. It's not a Bigfoot story, it's a Dogman story, but good grief. I can't even imagine. I'm not even going to add any comment to this. It's just, that story is so crazy. I'm not saying it's crazy that I don't believe it. I'm just saying it's so unusual that it's so rare that you hear these stories. And I don't get many Dogman stories, and much less one like this, but I don't know. I guess I could talk about this for an hour, but I won't because I don't want to bore you. There you go. That's the craziest story I've ever gotten on this channel, and you just heard it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching the video to this point. I hope you enjoyed all 3 stories, and we'll see you back on Marathon 114. Or I think my next video might be an interview. I've got 3 of them already recorded. I just need to do the edits and get them up. The next video will be a marathon or an interview. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.